Great, welcome back everyone. My name is Akasamitra. I'm going to be leading the second half of the evening. If anybody wants to come forward, we've got a bit of a canyon down the middle of the room and a bit of a few spaces at the front. Somebody actually is coming forward. I always ask and nobody ever does, but I keep trying. Lovely, thank you. That's great. Okay, good. So we're starting a new series this evening. So for those of you that are fairly new, what we do at Dharma Night is we run kind of series of talks where, look, someone's come actually right to the front. That's amazing. Extra points for that. We run talks in series basically, and we've got a series for the next 6 weeks on what we call the 6 paramitas, or the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva, and I'm going to say a bit more about what that means as the evening goes on. Also, just to say welcome to all of you that are joining us online as well. That's what we're doing this evening, and tonight, before I say anything else, actually what I want to do is, Kuslasara was talking about the Buddha and talking about the precepts, and I'm going to elaborate on both of those, and I want to take you back to begin with, to the evening of the Buddha's enlightenment. So before the Buddha was the Buddha, so most of you will know that Buddha actually is a title. So it means awakened one. It means one who is awake. So before he was enlightened, the Buddha was not the Buddha. He'd left home. He'd gone through these years of different practices, and eventually sat down to meditate, and he said that he wouldn't get up basically until he'd gained full liberation, full awakening. And those of you, are you familiar with this story? Does everybody in the room? Yeah, okay, so most of you know this, but I just want to take you right back there to the moment when, at the end of the attack of Mara, so there's this demon, isn't there, Mara, that turns up, and he tries to tempt the Buddha to be away, and he tries to a final ditch attempt, because it's really bad news for Mara if a Buddha comes into the world. He doesn't want the Buddha to gain enlightenment, because that would be really bad news for the world. It'd be good news for all of us, but really bad news for Mara. So what Mara does is he tries to tempt the Buddha. He tries to put him off. He launches an attack. And then eventually tries to undermine his confidence, doesn't he? And if you remember, the Buddha just reaches down and touches the earth. So the Buddha touches the earth. And he touches the earth, and the earth goddess comes up. And Mara says to the Buddha, well, who are you to gain enlightenment? And the Buddha says, well, I've practiced over numerous lifetimes. And you may not have heard this bit before, because we don't always teach it this way. But what the Buddha actually says to Mara is, I have practiced these 6 perfections over lifetimes. So I've perfected these 6 qualities. And Mara says, well, who is your witness? And the Buddha touches the earth, and the earth goddess comes up, and the earth goddess says, yeah, I can bear witness to the Buddha. He's practiced over numerous lifetimes, countless lifetimes. And what the Buddha actually practices is what we're calling the 6 perfections, or what are called the 6 perfections, and that's what we're going to look at this evening. So they are generosity, ethics, patience, energy, meditation, and wisdom. And this is what the Buddha's been practicing. So it's that enables him to go from to take that final step from a very, very advanced being, but not one who is enlightened, to full enlightenment. And you could say, well, in fact, you should say, that the Buddha was a Bodhisattva until that point that he became the Buddha. I'm going to say a little bit more about what a Bodhisattva is in a moment. But before I get to that, I just want to draw on that symbolism a little bit, because the earth goddess means something. So she symbolizes something. So she's the goddess of the earth. And what that means is she symbolizes it's the natural order of things. There's nothing supernatural about the Buddha's enlightenment. he has gained enlightenment because he's practiced these perfections. And in the teachings, it's said that if we practice those perfections, we also can become like the Buddha. So as the Buddha went from being a Bodhisattva to a Buddha, these perfections can take us from being an ordinary being to being a Bodhisattva. So there's nothing supernatural. It's the natural way of things, basically. You practice these qualities, you embody these qualities, you become these qualities more and more, and that has an effect. So, another little footnote is I'll just say what a bodhisattva is. So, as Satchidatta was saying at the start of the evening, sometimes these paramitas are called the 6 perfections of the bodhisattva or the bodhisattva path. So, as I said, the Buddha before he was a Buddha was a bodhisattva, and what that means is, it means literally being of wisdom, and it's a very, very, it's a being who is intent on liberation for themselves, but not just for themselves, but for the sake of all beings. So a being who is practicing intensely, they've taken a vow that they will practice intensively these 6 perfections so that they can relieve their own suffering, but also so that they can relieve suffering in the world and they can be of help to all beings in the world. Okay, so so what the 6 perfections are, as I said, it's generosity, ethics, patience, energy, meditation, and wisdom. Or in Sanskrit, that's dana, sila, kshanti, virya, samadhi, and prajna. And just to say that, so it's a Sanskrit word, paramita, and it means something. Well, it's made up of 2 words basically. So it means something like that which goes beyond. So it's something which takes us from our ordinary state of mind to a deeper state of mind. So it takes us from where we are now into a transcendent state, and that's how we get there, is practicing these qualities that I've talked about. And this evening, what I'm going to focus on is dana and sila. So dana means generosity, and sila means ethical practice. So in a way, it means talking about what Kusalasara was talking about at the break. So as Buddhists, we have the 5 precepts, and we practice them, and that's what's meant by, that's Buddhist ethics, basically. But it's really important that the reason why I started talking about the Buddha and the reason why I began with him is that all of this, it doesn't make sense to talk about the practice of generosity and ethics in a Buddhist context without that kind of illuminating light of the Buddha's vision. So the Buddha, when he gained enlightenment, saw very, very deeply into the way things are. So he saw that the universe works in a particular way. He saw that things aren't random. We talk about this in different ways, but one of the ways of talking about it is conditioned co-production. So he saw that things arise in dependence on conditions. He saw that, when the conditions that underpin those things cease, and that the universe isn't a sort of a load of random processes, basically. He saw that there are certain forces at work in the universe, and that they are discernible, and not only that, actually we can work with them. So things don't just turn up. I was trying to think of what an example of this would be. So, it's applicable to everything in the universe, but, like a really mundane example of that would be like your grumpy mood, for example. So I've been in a grumpy mood a lot of the day today, so I've had very good practice with this. And you can sit down and you can think, our temptation is to just think, this is just the way I feel and I don't want to feel this way. But actually, if you look, those things usually arise in dependence on conditions. So you can trace that back, and then when you understand the conditions that underpin something, you can then start to work with that, and you can do something about it, and you can work in such a way that you can lift your grumpy mood or change your grumpy mood or not be so prone to grumpy moods in the future. But it's applicable to everything. So everything that arises in the universe has arisen in dependence on certain conditions. So that includes the way all of you are will be because of a huge number of conditions. This Buddhist center, everything that we see around us, but also our internal states and everybody's internal states and ways that we think about the world. So all of that, you could apply the lens of conditionality, and it holds up. So this is really important because I'm going to start sort of talking about this in terms of ethics. So when we talk about dana and sila, it's really important because the Buddha, if we're practicing Buddhist ethics, we're doing that in line with what the Buddha taught. And the Buddha didn't just sit down after his enlightenment and then say, and think, okay, well, it'd be really great if I could get some followers, but I want them all to behave themselves. So, like, these are like the list of rules for my community or something like that. It's not like that at all. And also, it's very, very important to say that when we talk about Buddhist ethics, we're not talking about rules and we're not talking about commandments. What the Buddha is basically saying is, look, I've seen how things work. I've seen how it is. I know how things arise. I know how they cease. I know how the human mind works in relationship to that. I understand all of this. And if you practice what I teach, you will see a difference, basically. You will move closer to where I am, and that will relieve your suffering. And that's really important. So you can't, I don't like, there wouldn't be any point in following Buddhist ethics if there's no sort of sense of that, really. And then particularly within the teaching of conditionality, there are also, sort of, I don't know what you would call it, like kind of smaller teachings within that. So one of that is that we are not separate, basically. So we think of ourselves as a fixed and separate being, but the Buddha taught that we're not that. But we think we are, and that's what causes us suffering, basically. He also taught that nothing is fixed or permanent, but we think it is, and that's what causes us suffering. And that's why we suffer. So he also taught that there is suffering is inherent in conditioned existence. But what that means is it's actually inherent in our mind and the way that we think about things. So we get it wrong, basically. We get it back to front. We think we're fixed and separate, and we think that there's this kind of a being here that can't be changed, and there's some sort of ineffable essence to that. And we go about trying to sort of shore up that identity. And we also have this kind of deep longing for the things that we want to last. So we sort of, we want happiness, we want fulfillment, and then we get really disappointed when the things that we think are going to sort of permanently satisfy us don't satisfy us. And that's what makes us unhappy. So we don't see... it's almost like with the equipment that we have, we can't actually see what the Buddha's talking about. And to the extent that we don't see it, that's the extent to which we suffer. Is this making sense, what I'm saying so far? Yeah, okay, right. So because we can't quite see that, we behave in ways that then cause us suffering. So, so we go about our business in the world, and we really, really want, we're sort of longing for a sense of fulfillment. We're longing for kind of permanent happiness. We think that we can get it with the faulty equipment that we've got, and then we end up causing ourselves more unhappiness. So Can anybody think of ways that we do that? I mean, obviously not all of you. I'm sure you're much more advanced than all of that. But if a theoretical person, like in what do we do that doesn't see those truths that then sort of results in more suffering for us? Can anybody think of any examples? Pete, yeah.
Being greedy.
Right. So what would that mean? Being greedy? Like greedy in what way?
Like hoarding possessions.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So we want lots of stuff.
Like thinking that if we have a nice house and a nice car, that we'll be all right.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that would be one thing. And what's the result of that?
Well, I guess it stops us from being generous to others.
Yeah. Right. So so that's fine on its own level, isn't it? But then if that stops you from actually being generous, that kind of blocks your growth because you're kind of holding on. And what then happens if you sort of hold on and you hoard for yourself?
Probably start to suffer because, I don't know, where does it happen? Get obsessed with it? Right,
yeah, so you might get obsessed with, and then inevitably, like, you can't hold on to that sort of thing. You get old, did you say? Yeah. So eventually, somewhere down the line, you get old. Yeah. But it's interesting that, isn't it? Because I think it's important to say that it doesn't mean that material possessions cannot make you happy. But often what we think is that they're going to make us happier than they actually are. That's the thing, isn't it? Somebody was talking to me the other day, was sort of inviting people to do this thought experiment, which is like, if you think about stuff, so what we do is we impart meaning onto, what we do is we think that stuff has meaning, and actually it doesn't. And then, like advertising companies and so on, they're invested in getting us to want stuff. So they will invest meaning in it on our behalf. Like, say, the one I always quote is like perfume. They're always called things like mystery and eternity and stuff like that. But it's actually just it's like smelly water, basically. It's not really, it's just, but there's this whole narrative, Johnny Depp's there going like, like that, and he's holding up this kind of thing. And it's like, it's a bottle of perfume. So we're sort of told this, it's basically like, this is a really expensive thing, and if you own it, it's gonna enhance you in some way. So this sense of self that the Buddha said is actually an illusion, we're desperate for it to be true, and stuff like cars and perfume and stuff like that, it's not, you never sold a car because it's just a car, is it? It's like, it's going to enhance something of you. Are you the sort of person that drives an Audi? You don't want to be the sort of person that drives a Skoda, or I don't know. Although apparently they're very good cars. But so I've slightly lost my thread now. What was I saying? Yeah, that's right. So, but it doesn't do that for you, does it? So, like, if you can think of stuff in your life that you've really, really wanted, and yet, like, what is it now to you? Do you know what I mean? Like, I was thinking about this when I was a kid. I really wanted this like Masters of the Universe Castle Grayskull thing, because you get Skeletor to sit on a throne, and you twist the throne, and like He-Man falls down. Fantastic. But some years on, thankfully, probably you would say, like, I don't feel that actually owning that now has really contributed to like who I am. Or more in a more modern sense, like I make electronic music, and there's a whole load of like just gear lust that goes with that. So there's always a new synthesizer, there's always a guitar pedal, there's always, so it's like, oh, if I get that, that will somehow make me more complete, or I'll be able to make better music, and that will make me a cooler person, and all of that. And it just and then they just end up gathering dust, or they don't add to a sense of who you are. But we think that they do, basically. So I'm sure you can all think of examples of that. So this is what we do. We don't really understand that vision. So we don't act in accordance with it, which means that we end up causing ourselves more suffering. I'm talking in extremes here. Obviously, there's room for maneuver within this, but we end up causing ourselves more suffering. And then we also sometimes stop ourselves, as you were saying, Pete, from behaving in ways that actually would bring us more happiness and bring us more fulfillment, which paradoxically, what the Bodhisattva and the Buddhas are saying is it doesn't come from shoring up that sense of self. It comes from reducing that sense of self and going beyond oneself. And that's what the paramitas are. So particularly I'm talking about dana and sila tonight. That's actually going beyond oneself. It's actually putting that sense of self aside, realizing what the Buddha taught about us all being connected. If that's true, then generosity naturally comes out of that. If you see that you are connected to other beings, then you want to help other beings. And if you see that the way that you behave affects your own mental states and affects everyone else around you, then you'll naturally want to behave in that way. So there's nothing, it's not that we're bad people, and it's not that we're doing anything wrong. Well, we are doing something wrong, but not in that sort of primal sense, if you see what I mean. It's like we don't get it. It's like the Buddha's saying, this is how it is, and if you behave in accordance with this, then you will suffer less, basically. And to the extent that we don't get that, then that's why we sort of cause ourselves more suffering, basically. So when we don't do that, and when we act, so we use the word skillfully in Buddhism. So most of you will have heard this word before. Are you familiar with the phrase skillful and unskillful? Is anyone not familiar with that? Yeah. Okay. So when we say skillful and unskillful, it's important because it's not the same as good and bad. It's basically, one way of talking about it would be saying when you behave skillfully, it's in line with the vision that I've just talked about, and it will take you closer to where the Buddha is, basically. It will help your mind to grow in the direction of more love and compassion and openness by practicing those qualities. And unskillfulness is the opposite. It's when we behave in a way that doesn't actually reflect how things are. So not being generous, being tight, being, it's a whole sliding scale, right, through to being, violent, aggressive, hateful. And the effect of that is that it shuts us down and it causes us more suffering. And the thing is, we can't, I was thinking about this when I was putting this talk together, and it's like the way that we talk about it is, when we act in this way, or when we act in this way, as if there's a point where we think, oh, right, now I'm going to act. But actually, that's not how it is it? It's that actually we are acting all the time, every moment, like now even. The way you're sitting and listening to me is an act. You're choosing, and when I say act, I mean it's something that you're doing. You're not sitting there just passively receiving information. You're choosing to bring something to that. And you're choosing how much attention you pay. And you're choosing how to respond. I'm choosing now what I'm doing. And we're doing that every moment of every day. We are always acting. So there's no choice about whether you act or don't act. The only choice is whether you act skillfully or whether you act unskillfully in every moment. And it's like every moment we can make that choice. But obviously we need awareness to make that choice more and more. If we're not aware, then we can't do that. Okay, so I'll just pause for a moment and see if there's any questions on anything that I've said so far, or any questions or any clarifications. And then I'm going to jump over to the flip chart. That's exciting, isn't it? So any questions so far? Yes?
How do you think about the way in which, at least up to a certain point, actually having stuff can make our lives much better in some ways that seem conducive to happiness, or at least not being unhappy.
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? I mean, I think I don't think there's anything wrong with stuff. I think it's to do with the value that you place on it. So I think it's about seeing clearly what things are and what they aren't. So what I was saying before is that often we're encouraged to, this sense of longing that we have gets displaced, and we think that if we have certain things, they will provide that sense of satisfaction that we seek, and things can't really do that for us beyond a certain point. So, if you're living in a house and you've got, let's just say a nice sofa and something to listen to music on, well, great. There's nothing wrong with that, is there? But if you keep on trying to get a more and more expensive sofa and a more and more expensive hi-fi, it's not actually going to make you any happier, and eventually the sofa's going to wear out and the hi-fi's going to wear out. Do you see what I mean? So it's like it can't provide ultimate satisfaction for you, but it may provide some satisfaction. But it's interesting, like my experience of practicing over many, many years is I actually now, I don't really like having lots of things. Like I think one of the precepts is to practice simplicity, and I'm trying to do that. But I also find that through practicing meditation, I actually want to live a simpler life, and I don't like having lots of things. I just find it creates sort of clutter, and it's you have to attend to things and look after them, and do you know what I mean? I find it easier to live with the minimum, but I also think there's something quite nice in having some nice objects and treating them with care, but they can't provide that lasting satisfaction that we're looking for, and that sort of longing that we have gets put onto things, and we're encouraged to do that. And it's it's not just things, is it? It's things it's things like more abstract things like jobs or relationships, and it's a similar thing. We're encouraged to think that if we just find the right person, that will basically bring us lasting happiness forevermore. And it's not that relationships can't make you happy, but they can't provide that kind of satisfaction, I think. So I think it's a matter of perspective. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, Pete. Yeah.
I just also like that creates our sense of self, I think, as well. Like, who am I without all my stuff?
Yeah. That's right.
My relationship, my career.
Yeah.
What am I?
Yeah.
Nothing. Feels like I don't exist.
Yeah, that's right. So to the degree to which you get your sense of self from those things, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. When I was younger, I lived in a house share and we had a house fire, and I basically lost pretty much all my stuff, and I found it really liberating. Like, there's so much of my stuff. Even now, I live quite simply, and I regularly have clear outs. But there's quite a lot of my stuff that I look at that I think I can't quite bring myself to throw that away. But if I lost it in a fire, I'd actually be quite chuffed. I don't know why it's funny, but do you know what I mean? It's like you can't. It's like I can't quite. But so one of the things that I do is I get in the habit of giving things away. And I'll often, rather than like sell things on eBay or something like that, I'll often just give stuff away. And I'd rather give it to someone, and then I get to feel like, it's better than losing it in a fire because somebody actually gets to benefit from it. But I get to feel like I've cleared it out, and the person gets to feel happy because they receive it. So, anyway, okay. So, I'm just going to try and explain a little bit more about how this works. I've got a little diagram here. And so can everybody see this? Yeah, so we've got, there's sometimes the Buddhist path is talked about as being a threefold path. My thing doesn't work. Here we are, I'll use this one. So sometimes the Buddhist path talks about it as being a threefold path, and the threefold path is sila, samadhi, and prajna. But for the purposes of this, we could include dana in sila. I'll say a little bit more about that later. It's different models basically, but we could include generosity, dana, in sila. So sila is ethical conduct, samadhi is meditation, awareness, reflection, and prajna means wisdom. But it's wisdom in the sense of the Buddha. It's not like ordinary wisdom, like my gran's really wise because she lived through the war and all that sort of thing. So it's prajna in the sense of seeing reality as it is, exactly what I talked about earlier. So seeing conditioned co-production, seeing impermanence, seeing that we're not fixed and separate. Yeah. So when you practice ethics, when you practice sila and you practice samadhi, these two things reinforce each other, because when you're generous, when you practice ethics, when you practice kindness, so I'm listing here the precepts of kindness, generosity, contentment, truthfulness, mindfulness. When you do that, it has an effect on you. It basically leads to more positive, open mental states. And that means then that when you sit down to meditate, your meditation is better. You can access higher states of consciousness more easily. You can be more concentrated. You can enjoy meditation more. So these two things reinforce each other. Yeah. It's interesting when I lead introductory courses. Often people get very, very stuck in saying, "I'm really struggling in meditation. I'm distracted. I'm feeling really tight. I'm not enjoying meditation. All of that sort of thing. What can I do?" And what they mean is, what can they do in the meditation? But the best thing they can do is actually concentrate on what they're doing outside of the meditation. Like if you sit up watching Netflix all night until 3 a.m., you're not going to be able to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning to meditate. And if you do, you're just going to be replaying in your head what you saw, the night before. If you're really tight and you're never generous, if you're really, angry and all of that sort of thing, that's going to make meditation very difficult. Whereas if you're practicing ethics, that opens up your meditation practice. And when you open up your meditation practice, that begins to lead to what we call prajna, or wisdom. So it means that your mind is more open and more expansive, which means that you can see things more as they actually are. So those of you that have been on retreat will have had an experience of this. You spend more time meditating, you simplify your life, you drop all the narratives, and you just, in very, very positive conditions, what happens? Well, you start to appreciate beauty more. You start to feel more connected with people. You start to notice that your actions have consequences. You start to feel more positive. Well, that's prajna, that's wisdom. And I'm going to put this here. I'm not going to attempt to draw the Buddha, but let's imagine that the Buddha's sat here, and his vision is basically then coming down and having an effect on samadhi and sila, because when there's more wisdom, basically then you see how things are, so you see that actions have consequences. You see that if you're generous, that's really positive. You see that contentment is better than, this is the opposite precept from sexual misconduct. So you don't want to hurt people because you see how connected you are and you see the effect of your actions. So do you see then that all of this kind of mutually reinforces, basically? So I was thinking about this, and that, I don't know how that sounds to you, but it can sound a bit technical and a bit dry. So the way I thought about getting around that, I picked up this red marker here, but it doesn't seem to work. But another way of thinking about it is you could think about this as a massive dessert. And you've got like a big cherry at the top here, and then this is like a cake, and you've got kind of you've got this lovely sauce here, And then you've got hundreds and thousands. Do you remember hundreds and thousands? Yeah, they're great, aren't they? So, and then all of this lovely sauce drips down here. And this is like the dish that it's served in. So you end up with like, you know when you have, I went to a friend's birthday yesterday to this place called Mallow in Limehouse. I don't know if anyone's been there. This is the renunciant life. Anyway. And vegan place and the most fantastic dessert. And you know when you get like a little sponge and a bit of ice cream and a sauce or something like that, the best bit's right at the end, isn't it? Where it all kind of melds together and you get that last couple of mouthfuls. And it all just, it's really like, wow, like that. That could be a bit like this, basically. That's all gathered here, and all the sauce drips down, and it's really lovely, basically. That's the important thing. Because you could think, oh, well, yeah, sila, samadhi, prajna, da, da. But actually, what that feels like in life is it feels more open, it feels more expansive, it feels more beautiful, it feels more tasty. So like when I was younger, that's I wanted that. You know, I really wanted that. I wanted kind of I wanted a life that felt like it had more meaning and it had more purpose, and I wanted experiences that were going to give me that. But I went about it in the wrong way. You know, I was drinking, I was taking drugs, I was partying, and that was all fun. But the funny thing is, like years later, what I've realised is that actually what I wanted doesn't come from that. It comes from, it's counterintuitive. It comes from simplicity, and it comes from generosity, and it comes from basically practicing the precepts. But when you talk about it, it can all sound a bit dry, but when you experience it, that's what it's like. I'm not going to go through the metaphor again, but anyway. Okay. So, these are perfections. So that's important to say, and that what that means is that we're practicing on our level, and it also means that we're going to fall short in some way. So, you know, the Buddha had perfected these qualities. So I think it's an interesting way of looking at it, and an important thing to think about is the Buddha doesn't have to try to be ethical. He doesn't have to try to practice the perfections. He has practiced them so much that they are just then the way he is. So when you read about stories from the Buddha's life, when people came to see him, he was always kind, he was always considerate, he was always generous. That's just the way he is. He's completely perfected those qualities. For us, we're not at that level. So we're always going to be practicing them to some degree imperfectly, and we're always going to have slightly mixed motives as well. So I think that's really important to say, and like that's okay. It's all right to practice with mixed motives. The most important thing is to practice. But there's no limit to how far we can go with that. Absolutely no limit at all. So, you know, the Buddha embodies these qualities to a kind of an infinite degree. And I think that's important because sometimes what we do is we see it from where we are. So I remember once being in a group with someone and we were talking about being generous. And I think it might have been on a course. And we were trying to encourage people to do a kindly or generous act each day. And the person said, "Oh, yeah, I haven't been doing that because I'm quite generous already, you know." And I just thought, like, that's not, you know, I'm trying to like impart some infinite kind of thing here. It's not like, oh, well, you're quite kind already, you know, like, I don't know. Anyway, I won't say any more about that. But okay. So the other thing I want to say as well is, I think if we look deeply at ourselves and we also look around us, I think we can well, obviously we can see what the Buddha was talking about. And I think you could say that the universe is an ethical universe. We live in an ethical universe. Otherwise, Well, I mean, I'd invite you to look at this in yourself. Like, have you ever done anything very, very, very kind or very skillful? Or you could even just think about small, skillful or generous things that you've done. But, think of a big example and just think, you don't need to say anything now, but just think about how that made you feel or what the effect of that was. And this is the samadhi bit of it. It's really important to actually reflect on this, because that then, it leads to wisdom, and it also leads to an effect on your ethical practice when you can actually see the effect it has. So think about that, and then you could also think about if there's anything that you've ever done that is the opposite of that. Have you ever done anything really harmful or really unskillful, and what was the effect of that on you? So I was thinking about a couple of examples of this, and so this idea that the universe is an ethical universe, and I thought of two examples. So some of you might even have heard me tell this story before, but does anybody know the story of Donald Crowhurst? So I've told his story quite a lot. I mean, it's a long story, I haven't got time to go into it now, but he's basically a guy who entered a round-the-world yacht race in the late 60s and ended up cheating. He was in a kind of an impossible situation. He ended up cheating, and he told lies to the whole world about what he was doing, and he ended up in a situation where he was going to be forced to the truth was going to be revealed, basically. And it was so painful for him that he actually ended up losing his mind, and we don't know exactly what happened to him, but they found his boat, they didn't find him, and he never came home, and his wife and children were left without a father. So I gave a long talk about this. I think the talk was called All at Sea, and there's an order member called Vasantra that's written about it in his book Tales of Freedom as well. It's an incredible story, and it's a very, very sad story. But the interesting thing is, right at the end of his life, he left out the two logbooks, one of which was false, one of which was real. Like, he wanted people to actually know the truth at the end. But it was very, very painful. Like, it drove him to the edge of despair because, that's what behaving unethically does to you. It has a disintegrating, painful effect. Like, I don't know if you've ever had this, where you've been carrying around a secret or something you've done wrong. What do you want to do? You want to confess it to someone, don't you? You want to tell someone. And even telling the truth to one person can be a relief, can't it? There's another documentary that I watched a few years ago called The Great Hip Hop Hoax. Has anybody seen that? No. It's basically about these two guys, Scottish hip hop guys, and they're desperately trying to make it in the world of hip hop, but nobody wants to sign a Scottish hip hop act. I don't know whether it would work or not. I thought they were great, actually. I thought they sounded better in Scottish, but anyway. So what they do is they start pretending that they're American, and unfortunately for them, they start doing really well, and they get this massive contract, and they're signed by like Sony in the US. They've got this huge record company advance, and they're on TV all the time, and of course they're having to pretend that they're American all the time. They're from like Airdrie or something like that, and they have to concoct this story that they're from this place in California. And the only people that they can be truthful with are like themselves and a couple of close friends. And they're constantly having to pretend. And they can't pretend, they can't remember who they've told or who they haven't. And the stress of it gets really, really bad. So then they're drinking loads. And then when they're drinking, they can't remember if they're lapsing into Scottish accents or not. And it's really, really... And they end up... The friendship goes horribly wrong. They end up having a really, really hard time of it. And, it's a similar thing, basically. It's like the universe is an ethical universe. When you behave skillfully, it responds. it enables you to feel more, all of the qualities that I've talked about. And the opposite is true, isn't it? When we behave unskillfully, it shuts us down. It causes us suffering. So not just the people around us. It causes us suffering, and it causes us to experience very difficult mental states. Okay, so I'm going to start wrapping up in a minute. It's quite simple, really. In a way, all of this is quite simple. It's like the Buddha's saying, I can see how things are. If you behave in accordance with the way I say the world actually is, you need to experience for yourself the way the world actually is, and you do that through practicing ethics. That's a path, and it's actually a fruit. So you practice that path, and then you actually become those qualities more and more, and you actually understand more and more the context of what you're doing. So there's a momentum around that, basically. And the more you do that, then the more you will move towards where the Buddha is, and the less you'll suffer. So I'm going to make this a bit practical now, and I'm going to say, so in terms of generosity, what could you actually do? What are some things that you can do? So the first thing I'm going to say is go and retreat. So we say this all the time, don't we? We say this in the announcements, in the break, but we say this because it's a really good thing to do. Like, if you want to understand all of this, and you want to understand ethical practice, you need to be in conditions that support that. It's very, very hard to do that from day to day when you're just in your busy life and you're kind of bombarded with various different things. You spend time on retreat, you can let go of all those narratives, and you're in perfect conditions to actually practice ethics. It's like an environment that supports ethical practice, meditation, and ethical acts of body, speech, and mind as well. Spend time on retreat, and you'll see all of this slightly differently. And then just want to say a little bit about generosity. So some of you that are a bit newer might not actually know how the London Buddhist Centre works. So we couldn't do any of this without people's generosity, basically. So this team the Monday night class is run by a team of volunteers. I've been helping out with this class for, nearly 20 years, and I don't get paid to do it, and I don't want to get paid to do it, and nobody gets paid here. Nobody gets paid a salary at the London Buddhist Centre. Some people get paid their expenses when they work at the centre, but everybody just gives because they want to give, and we're creating a culture of generosity, basically. So, you could help out at the centre, you could donate to us. And then, was anybody here last week for the T. Ratnaloka appeal? Okay, only 2 of you, but... Okay, a few more of you workers, sorry, yeah, okay. So this is also something that you could give to if you want to be generous. So we're trying to raise money to build a new retreat centre for women's ordinations. At the moment, the retreat centre that we have is too small, and women in our order who want to train for ordination are unable to do that, or unable to do it at the pace that they would like, because we just don't have the facilities. So if you want to be generous, and I would strongly encourage you to do that, you could give a donation to this. We've started a fundraising campaign at the London Buddhist Centre for the next few weeks, and if you donate, we will match your donation. So you could give to that appeal. You could also, so some of you know, and I've talked about this at the class before, but I work for a charity called Karunar. We fundraise in the UK. We give money to organisations in India and Bangladesh. And that's my sort of day job, so to speak. And I spend a couple of months of the year in India and Bangladesh working with communities that are supporting people in really, really difficult circumstances. So people that are born into horrendous situations, they're often tied to very degrading occupations that are linked with their birth, supporting girls to stay in school in places where there's very high school dropout and lots of child marriage, lots and lots of different projects. absolutely amazing work. The work is transformational for so many people. We help hundreds of thousands of people each year. And that only is made possible by people that are connected to our Buddhist community, the Triratna Buddhist community, doing fundraising for us. So at the moment we've got a door-to-door appeal happening. We've got another door-to-door appeal happening soon. We also run telephone campaigns as well. And anyone who's connected with our community can come and help out. So we do fundraising appeals for usually 6 weeks at a time. We support people financially to do that. And that's an incredibly generous thing that you could do, to give up your time, to do something that kind of feels uncomfortable, to benefit people that you will probably never meet. It's an absolutely fantastic thing to do. I did a door-to-door fundraising appeal a few years ago. I actually really enjoyed it. It's funny, like the narrative that people say around it is, oh, it's really, really difficult, it's really hard. I actually enjoyed it. It was a really lovely thing to do. And you live with other people, you spend time with other Buddhists, so it's a way to deepen your connections with people. Okay, so just to conclude, I think it's really a matter of, with everything that I've talked about, with Buddhist ethics and with the paramitas, it's not about doing what you're told. It's not about following rules. It's a matter of, who do you want to become? What do you want to do? Because that will have an effect on you. And who do you want to be? What sort of person do you want to become? We're constantly creating a future self in whatever we choose to do. So, what do you want your future to be? And what do you want the future to be for people around you? So really what this is all about is how we change and grow. And the paramitas and the precepts, ethics, generosity, they need to be practiced. That's the most important thing. I cannot emphasize that enough. We can sit here, we can take notes, we can think about it, all of that sort of thing. The most important thing is that you actually practice. You practice generosity, you practice kindly speech, you practice all the rest of it, and then you notice the effect of that, and that then reinforces you wanting to practice that more. And I've given you a few ways that you can practice that this evening. Okay, so I'll leave it there, but it's not quite the end of the evening yet, because on the subject of generosity, what we'd like to do at the end of this evening is say thank you to Satchidasa. So Satchidasa has very, very generously been helping out at this class team. We were trying to think about how long it was earlier on this evening, and none of us could remember, which means it's a very long time. So Satchidasa was helping out on this team before he was ordained. He's been helping out for many years as an order member and teaching, and we're very, very grateful to him, and he's leaving the class team this evening. So I was thinking about Satchidasa and his qualities, and I was saying earlier that none of us get paid to do this, and we don't really get taught how to teach in a sense either. In fact, we're not really teachers. What we are is people who've been practicing for some time who just want to share their experience, and we don't get told what to say either. We're not given a crib sheet of like, okay, you need to say X, Y, and Z. It's left up to you. And what that means is, you probably notice that each of us is quite different. And Satchidasa, I really have appreciated his teaching because he's such an individual. He's always got a fresh perspective on things. He's got a very, very creative mind. He knows the Dharma very well. He's steeped in spiritual practice over many, many years. But he will never say something just because it's something other people say. He thinks very, very deeply and very clearly about things, and he's always got an interesting perspective. And I just always enjoy his kind of lively, engaging communications. And I think we'll really, really miss him at this class. So we really want to wish Satchidasa well, and just say thank you for everything that you've done for the class. So. And we need to pause for a moment. And Kuslasara's got some flowers for you. Okay. Yeah, so thank you very much, Satchidasa, and wishing you well on your way.